YouTube, in this video I'm going to walk you through how to upgrade a processor in a Windows-based laptop. This laptop you see here is an HP, and it came with a first generation Core i3 380M processor. The one I'll be replacing it with is the one I have here, which is a Core i5 560M that I found on eBay for $15 shipped, which was too cheap to pass up. The tools you're going to need are a few screwdrivers, you'll need a little bit of thermal paste for when you actually change the CPU, and you'll also need some acetone for cleaning off the existing thermal paste. The first thing we're going to do to get started is power down the laptop and flip it over so we can start disassembly. The first thing to do is to take out the battery. Just move that little lever over, take the battery out, set that aside. The next thing to do is to get your Phillips head screwdriver out and start taking out a lot of, or most all of these screws here. The first two you want to take off are the ones that hold this back panel on. And you can go ahead and set that aside. So then you'll see the inside you've got your solid state disk or your hard drive. This is the RAM right here. This is the Wi-Fi card right there. What you also see is a few more screws that have revealed themselves. There's 3 along the battery tray here, and there's maybe about 4 more in different spots around the inside. I'm going to go through, undo all the ones on the outside, these couple on the inside, and the ones on the battery tray, and then we can start to really pry her apart. Okay, so now you can go ahead and flip it back over, open it up. Okay, the next step is to pull the keyboard out, which unfortunately involves some just good old-fashioned prying, which is not too great for the cosmetics of your laptop, but hopefully at this point it's old enough to where you can live with it. You want to get some flathead screwdrivers and begin to pry around the edges until you can get 1 or 2 underneath, and then you can just pull the rest of it up pretty easily with snaps. Once you've got it to this point where it's a little bit loose, you'll need to gently move it over so you can see the ribbon cable underneath. And you'll see there's a little black tab here that you can flip up to release the ribbon cable from the motherboard so that it pulls away. Set your keyboard aside and then we can keep moving. Taking the keyboard out revealed one additional screw that needs to come out in order to take the rest of the laptop apart, which is right here. Once this guy is pulled out and set aside with the others, there are a few ribbon cables that need to be undone. Next thing you need to do is pull this faceplate off. And now you need to make sure that all your screws have come out first. But once you do, that guy just pops right off and he can be set aside. So now we're down to the motherboard. There's a few more things that need to be undone before we can take that out to get to the processor. The first is one more screw up here in the front, which needs to come out. And the rest are a few more ribbon cables and connections. There's one up in the front here for some LEDs on the side of the laptop. Then there's a little plug for the speaker wire right here. This is a little connector that runs a little wire over to where your optical disc plugs in. This right here needs to be pried up, and this powers your screen. There's a connection over here for some USB ports on the other side of the laptop, and then buried underneath this right here is just the charging connector. So now, once that's done, we can move all these cables off to the side and then pull the motherboard out. And it should just come right out. There is one additional cable underneath that connects your hard drive. Now that this guy's out, this is the entire motherboard, all the brains of your computer. And you can see right here the blower fan for the CPU, and then the heat pipe, the copper heat pipe that connects to the CPU, and the CPU is housed under here. There's just a few things left to get at the processor, and to start you want to pull this little group of wires out of its socket here to unplug the blower fan. And the last thing is to take a Phillips head screwdriver and to unscrew these little spring-loaded hold-down screws, and then pull off the fan and heatsink. And you can see under here this gray goopy stuff is the existing thermal paste that needs to be wiped off and replaced with new thermal paste. So we'll go ahead and set this fan aside. Now what you've got is you finally made it to the processor. You had to take the whole laptop apart to do it, but here it is, and this guy will have to come out. If you take a flathead screwdriver and you put it in this little slot here, you give that a turn, you can release the processor, so this guy just pops right out. So we can set him aside. Now just one note, the way that this worked was when you put in your flathead screwdriver, you can see that when you turn it, this whole gray plastic portion, although with some difficulty, slides back and forth to apply some clamping pressure onto the little pins that stick out on the back side of the CPU. Make sure that you don't bend or break off any of these pins. It will not work well if you do that. So let me go ahead and grab the new CPU and we can start putting this guy back together. The first thing you'll want to look for is a little indicator on one of the corners. That's a little triangle, and you'll want to match that up with a corresponding triangle on the socket, which It's hard to see, but it's right over here on the corner. Once you get those lined up, gently, without forcing it, and set it down in there. But once you get it in place, you can go ahead and turn the little cam again until it's back in the starting position. Now your processor is fully installed. Okay, so the next step before reassembly is to look at the underside of the heatsink, and like I mentioned, that gray thermal paste underneath there, that will need to come off. The best thing to use is to use acetone and some coffee filters. And coffee filters are great because they don't leave a lot of lint behind. Okay, so I have gone ahead and applied thermal paste to my CPU. You can get this at a lot of places. You can get it from Newegg, Micro Center, even Radio Shack will probably have it. And there's a lot of different videos and different opinions on how to apply it, how much to apply it, how to spread it around. I don't want to get into that, so I did it off camera, and I have a thin coat of thermal paste applied to both contact points from the CPU. And I have gone ahead and cleaned off the underside, the contact side of the heatsink. So that will set right down on top of the processor just like it came off. And you'll want to go ahead and take screws and carefully putting these back in. So you want to tighten these to the point where they're a little bit tight. If you crank them down, it won't do you any good because really what's holding it in place are the springs that are on there anyways. Basically, the rest of this process is following the disassembly steps in reverse order to get everything reassembled again. Now, that can be a little bit tedious, but that's all there really is to it. This is the new processor installed, and so I'm going to throw the laptop back together and then show you what it looks like when it comes back online. Alright, I'm proud to announce that everything is all back together and up and running. Here is the original i3 CPU, all nice and clean out of the machine. I've got the Core i5 560M displayed right here, and also right here on the system page. This is a utility called CPU-Z that'll tell you a lot about your processor if you're not familiar with it. I did some benchmarks, and it's basically a utility called SuperPi that calculates pi to whatever number of digits that you specify. So I ran tests for 1 million, 8 million, and 16 million digits of pi on my 380 processor before I started this process of upgrading, and then I just ran it now that the upgrade is complete, and I calculated the performance increase, and it's between 12 and 17%, at least in this benchmark. So I'm pretty happy about that. It was successful. I hope you guys learned something and pass along knowledge. Thanks for watching.